It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. This is the Finance and Operations Committee meeting of the Nashua Board of Education. We are in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. It is 6:03. You can't call? Well, I'll call the roll. Okay. Mrs. Oden is here. Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Mr. Mosier?
I'm here.
By phone. Are you alone, and can you hear us okay?
I am definitely alone, and I can hear you clear as crystal.
Okay. Also here is Ms. Porter and Mr. Donovan and Mr. Smith. So we will start with our first item. It's a presentation from Dr. Ann Vermette from the Make-A-Wish Foundation about the Nashua High South weight room. And they're going to give us a presentation of some of a fulfillment they want to do for Make-A-Wish for one, a former student, I believe. Okay, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to, and Lisa Gingras is here. Let me add her name. Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for having us. We are hoping not to take much of your time, but we want to inform you of a project that's ongoing and also to ask for your approval for it to take place. So I'm just going to read the statement because I'll be very honest, I get a little choked up when I talk about this. So the night before the NHIAA Wrestling Meet of Champions this past February, Nathaniel Tejada, a 12-season Nashua South senior student athlete, noticed a bump about the size of a ping pong ball on his neck. The next morning, Smiley, as he has been known since 5th grade, took to the mat to compete in the most prestigious New Hampshire wrestling event. The next day, Smiley went to the doctor about the lump. He then was at Mass General for further testing, and it was determined on February 28th of this year that Smiley had stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Smiley began chemo to battle his cancer soon thereafter. A senior in high school, a football player, a baseball player, and a wrestler with a positive attitude and a smile on his face was about to fight for his life. And he did it with that smile on his face. He underwent 4 months of chemo and 2 months of radiation. Through it all, he remained part of the baseball program, attended most of his normal senior activities, was named prom king, and most importantly, graduated with his class. I'm happy to say that Smiley is doing very well. On October 11th of this year, he was told that he is in remission. He's a freshman at Springfield College and working hard on their wrestling team. When contacted by the Make-A-Wish Foundation about what he might want, a car, a trip, whatever, he immediately asked to have his high school weight room redone and updated. Over his 4 years at South, Smiley spent countless hours in that room with his 3 teams, numerous teammates, and he wanted to give back. Make-A-Wish has been working hard since March to grant this wish for Smiley. The plans have progressed, but the timeline was slowed due to the magnitude of the project and the many donations that were required. We've been working closely with Linda Pearson and Ann Vermette from Make-A-Wish to grant this selfless wish for Smiley. Currently, we are projected to have the work done over the 2-week holiday break and have a ribbon-cutting ceremony of some kind while Smiley is home on college break. So, Ann, if you want to talk a little bit about the project.
My name is Dr. Ann Vermette, and I'm a volunteer with Make-A-Wish, and I'm Smiley's wish granter, along with Linda Pearson. As Lisa said, his wish was to redo the weight room. So we finally have everything in place, and we plan to start the project on December 27th and continue as needed on December 28th, 30th, January 2nd, and January 3rd. The work will consist of bringing in new equipment from Rogue Fitness and some weight racks that were donated by Dynamic Strength and Conditioning. We'll repad the benches and other equipment, which will be done by Full Circle padding, all in the same color. We want to clean up the existing equipment as well as discard the old equipment that's no longer needed. There will be a new sound system installed by Home Theater Simplified during this time frame as well. Wall graphics will be installed as much as possible, this being done by Max Wraps. Volunteers will be unwrapping the new equipment and helping out in whatever capacity is needed, and the new equipment will be installed by professionals. So that is how we are finally hoping to make Smiley's wish come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Quite a young man. Quite a young man. Been through a lot and not thinking about himself, but
To leave a legacy.
wow. Anybody have any questions, comments? Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. I want to thank you for pursuing this and the amount of work it takes to get something like that done. The young man, I wish him well. Thank you also to the folks who've made the donations to help this get realized. Those are companies that are paying for it, so they're giving back to the community and certainly appreciate it. I do have one question about the equipment that we have now that is going to be replaced, or what would have been ours. Can that be repurposed within the school system somewhere?
Some of the equipment is very old and is beaten because it's used 12 months a year, not only by our student athletes, but also by our students during phys ed classes and things like that. So much of the equipment that is being replaced is because it's no longer usable. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, we did do a significant upgrade. None of that equipment is being replaced. It's just all of the equipment at that time that we couldn't afford to continue replacing. So I don't really think there's much that's salvageable of the things that we are removing.
I was just curious. The other question, what exactly is being replaced?
Do you want to tackle that one, or you want me to?
Are they weight machines, or are they ellipticals?
We're bringing in the new weight racks, recumbent bikes. I believe there's an elliptical that's coming in. Anything that can be salvaged and cleaned up is being salvaged. And like the bicycles, the handles have been broken off. The kids don't even have handlebars on the exercise bikes. So those are being replaced, and they've asked for recumbent bikes. And we've been able to grant that wish. And most of the benches are being repadded. So whatever's salvageable, we are salvaging.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
What do you need from us?
Thank you. We're just going to approve that they go forward with this.
I think because it is a significant
Whitman.
donation to the school, that we were told that we needed to come before you asking for approval to allow the volunteers to come in and make this happen.
What is the value of the donation?
Make-A-Wish, it's $10,000, and Dynamic Strength and Conditioning with their weight racks, I'm not exactly sure on that figure,
Okay.
but it is significant.
Well, thank you. And what I would ask, if you could let the board send out a reminder when you're going to be there. I wrote down December 28th through 27th through January 3rd.
27th, 28th, 30th,
27th?
January 2nd, and January 3rd, if needed.
Okay. So if you could just send, maybe Lisa could send out a reminder, because I would like to stop by. I think I'd love to meet that young man. So thank you, and on behalf of all our students, thank you for what you're doing. You and Linda Pearson, we certainly appreciate everything, and what a fine young man graduated from Nashua High South.
Mrs. Oden, two
Yes.
things. One is, are you going to need logistical support from custodians or plant operation? Right, school is not in session, right?
Right.
So I would imagine, Sean, do they have to coordinate anything with you for access to the buildings? I've got to believe they've got to come through some kind of a big door somewhere.
Yeah, we've already had conversations for the last couple of weeks
Okay,
on this, so we should be all set.
okay, thank you. Mrs. Oden, would you like a motion?
Yes.
Motion to approve the Make-A-Wish donation.
I'll second it.
Okay. We'll take the vote. Do you want to read the motion, Ms. Porter?
So the motion is to approve the Make-A-Wish donation.
Okay. Uh, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden is yes, so it's unanimous with great appreciation.
May I just add one thing? Sure. One of the things I just wanted to add, when you were asking about the logistics of the building being accessible and things like that, we purposely scheduled it during school vacation so it would be least disruptive to the students, as well as that's the same time frame that we host our big basketball tournament. So a lot of people will be on site and available to help as needed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, wow, what a, just super. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving on to the second item on the agenda is the energy savings update. And would you two please introduce yourselves?
Mike Davey.
Chris Claridi.
Okay, and thank you. I know you've been here before. Sorry, I didn't remember the names.
That's right.
And when you speak, if you just make sure the green button is on, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Okay.
So again, Mike Davey with EEI, and I'm here. I think this is my fourth time before this committee, and happy to be here. And that was a really exciting presentation to follow up on. So we have just a quick refresher to the committee. Last year, the district did a request for qualifications for a performance contract to try and reduce energy savings across the Nashua School District, with the first focus being on the high schools. And it was noted from some previous presentations that the energy usage at the two high schools is about 35% higher than the national average for energy usage by square footage. There's a couple reasons for that. One is the lighting is all fluorescent lighting, and it's a big school and it's air conditioned, and there's large amounts of space that's air conditioned, and it's heavily used. So there's an opportunity to do energy efficiency upgrades that would reduce the consumption at the schools by $440,000 a year in energy savings. That's at the total of Nashua South and North, and that would bring the energy usage down in line below the national average. And then we presented some results of some similar schools where the energy savings have been close to 50% after a fairly comprehensive project like this was implemented. So we've, since February, been working on an energy audit at Nashua North and South High School, which would include some major improvements such as LED lighting, HVAC controls, and then replacing the inefficient transformers with 99.5% efficient transformers, as well as replacing some end-of-life equipment like the water heaters and small air conditioning units throughout the school. And if the entire project were improved, it would reduce energy consumption by $448,000 a year, and we would get energy rebates, a one-time rebate of $850,000. The project cost is approximately $7.4 million. And a lot of times what districts do is they try and have these projects be essentially budget neutral, and that the energy savings each year matches up with the finance period. So we have before you two proposals from a leasing company called Municipal Leasing Consultants, which with a 20-year lease and a 15-year lease, the 20-year lease would be budget neutral. So the energy savings at each high school would be offset, or the annual lease payment at each high school, if you use a 20-year term, would be offset by the annual energy savings. And so it would be essentially budget neutral. There would be a lease line item in the budget of roughly $220,000 if you did a 20-year lease, and that would be offset by similar amount of energy savings that would be reduced from the energy budget. Last time, so I brought this proposal last time, and we were asked to show what a 15-year proposal would be. So for Nashua North, just to give you an example, a 20-year project would be $220,000 in annual payments at a 2.99 interest rate, whereas a 15-year payment would be $274,000, and you'd save about 0.2 of a point on interest rate. So if you wanted to pay this off sooner, you'd have to add the difference to the budget, which is roughly $54,000. But that would allow you to pay it off 5 years earlier and essentially save some significant interest. So that comes more a philosophical board decision. So a lot of boards we deal with, like for example the Manchester School Board, they want it to be 20-year terms and budget neutral, and that's sort of the direction that we were initially under. Other boards, like in Jaffrey Ringe, they looked at the long-term interest rate and said we'd rather have a little more pain for the 15 years, but for example, save in interest in the long run. So that's more of a philosophical discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Kaufman?
It's funny you use the word philosophical, because I have a similar kind of concern about this. The operating budgets are generally one-year budgets. We have things where we might lease space like we do for Brentwood, where it's a couple of years, or services for physical therapy and all those guys are sometimes 2, or even maintenance contracts are like 3 years. But we generally don't go out very far in terms of what kinds of contracts we put in the operating budget. So, and I appreciate what Mr. Smith said about, and I really do appreciate he was very clear about his recommendations and not suggesting that we go bonding, but rather that we do it in the operating budget. But my philosophical problem is about having a 20-year lease commitment in the operating budget. And it goes so far beyond the commitments of any particular board. You know, even the employment contracts are 3 or 4 years, and usually within the term of a board member. They don't go very much beyond that. And I'm just concerned that if the board were to pass this, we're making a 20-year commitment out of the operating budget, as compared to a 20-year commitment out of a bonded, or even the capital, I should have this terminology right by now. I'm sorry. The capital improvement and maintenance budget. I mean, I would, because that's really what it is, right? We're replacing equipment where we're going to get a payback from it, and it can pay for it. But so philosophically, Mr. Donovan, I would appreciate your input, because you're going to live with this very soon. I'm not going to be here.
Well, I'm not going to live with it for 20 years, because I won't be around that long. But it's true that we don't, in the operating budget, the longest agreement that we did sign a 6-year term on the copiers. But the reality is, in our operating budget, because of the way we do the financing in the city, there's long-term money, which is bonds, like you mentioned, and they're 20 years. Sometimes they could be 25 years. Most of the significant purchases that are done through bonds. So that's typically what we've done. We haven't done lots of operating leases. Other than the copiers, we don't have any. And I've been here 10 years now, and that's the only operating lease that we've really had. So we've pretty much been able to sort of pay cash for things. But as you've seen and heard from Mr. Smith when he talks about his deferred maintenance and things like that, what have we done in the last few years to help with some of our deferred maintenance problems? We've put those costs into the bonds when we've done the renovations of schools. And Mr. Smith is going to present in a little while after this all the various issues he still has with deferred maintenance items. So in a sense, what this is this is a way to do some of that deferred maintenance through an operating lease. Yes, it is a longer term, 20 years, but we can get some of that done as well as the safety measures. So if you think about it, some of the things on Mr. Smith's list might be covered by these sorts of things. So it's another option going forward. Would it be wonderful to get everything done in an operating budget? Sure, but these days it just doesn't, we don't have the money for that. And when you look at the number of schools we have and all the work that needs to be done, to me, I think it's a good option. It is a 20-year option, but we do get that savings. And as long as that savings is guaranteed, which it is, and one of the questions that I had asked Mr. Davey, I said, okay, so that bond, the question that Sean mentioned it in his email, he said, can we get a bond in case something happens to EEI, which I believe Mr. Kaufman asked that question. And we can get that bond a year or two later if we want. So, but if the savings turn out to be the first 2 or 3 years of, let's say, $250,000, which is above the 220, which I would assume if these guys know what they're doing, they're not going to go right at the top of their number because they're going to have to pay it back. So there's got to be a little bit of a factor in there. We could, if it's real close and we hear bad news about EEI, then we could always go and get that bond then. But at this point in time, it's a good company. So at this point in time, I don't think we need the bond.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Donovan. So I'm curious, so the difference between the 15 and 20 year is around $54,000.
Right.
So if it actually hits it out of the park and we really see significant savings, that $50,000 will be realized over the course of a year. And I think there was a prepayment ability within the contract that's proposed. But I know it's impossible to suggest where targeted money could go in the future.
Yeah, I mean, unless we took a bond out to pay this off, but with the middle school going, I don't think that's
Right. I don't think our chances to get another bond anytime soon is going to happen.
No.
The other thing, and I just want to mention this because this is where my reservation is, in the option 1, the 20-year option. Oh, I'm sorry. There's over $1 million in interest being paid to the loan over 20 years. That really does come out of the bottom line of the operating budget. I mean, I know it's amortized, so, you know, you get hit up front with the bulk of the interest payments in the first, I don't know, probably 10 years. I don't know. I didn't look at it that closely. So I'm just concerned out of the operating budget. See the bonding is sort of a mystery. It's out of this other bucket, kind of managed by the city. I know the money comes from us, but it's kind of transfers and things that we really don't see in the operating budget. But this is over $1 million being paid in interest out of the operating budget. And
Sure.
I just struggle with that.
But it's the interest rate itself isn't very high. It's a good interest rate. If we bonded it, we'd be paying it an interest rate close to that. I don't know exactly what it would be, but the reality is, when we discussed this with the city about getting a bond, that was the first option we had. It didn't look like that bond was going to lead the way, so to speak.
So, and just to give you an example, because we deal with this this exact question through most municipalities in New Hampshire and Vermont, and there's 3 or 4 reasons why leases are more common for this type of project. The first being that the interest rates have been extremely close. So this interest rate is sub 3%. It's most bonds are in that exact range. So there's not much of an interest payment one way or the other. So the advantages of the lease are it can be paid off. It can be paid off early. Most bonds cannot be. So if you have a surplus one year and you have $1 million surplus and you want to pay this entire lease off at once, you can do that. With a bond, you typically cannot. And the other thing is because it's paid from the operating budget, it's offset by energy. So if you didn't do this project, your energy savings, your energy costs would be the same as they are now. We're going to lower the energy cost by $400,000 and replace it with a lease by a similar amount. So your operating budget isn't really changing. It's instead of paying Eversource and Liberty, you're paying the leasing company until it's paid off. The other thing, which has been a factor, is because it's in the operating budget, it does not have it doesn't go against the city's overall bonding capacity. I know, for example, in Portsmouth, they had this major wastewater project that was a $100 million project, so they were a little concerned about not using up so much of their bonding capacity on projects, and so leases can be attractive when the city's concerned about their overall bonding capacity, and I know you guys have a lot of other projects in the city.
I have one last thing, if I can, Mrs. Oden. So just reading this, the proposal, it was something here, in the middle of page 2. The above quotes are fixed from December 4th to January 3rd in anticipation of closing or funding by this date. So one of the things we've discussed in this committee before was that this committee, this version of this committee, would do the due diligence, but reserve the next board to commit and make the decision. If the statement in this proposal is in effect what's needed, that would not be the case. You're asking this committee to vote it forward to the board, and the board probably next week at our board meeting be asked to approve this within the time window that's here. And am I reading this correctly? Or will it be the next board that gets to vote on this, where this committee can vote one way or the other, but it's the board that has to approve it?
That would be up to the board. If this, I would suggest that this committee vote yay or nay on it. If the full board would like to vote on it at their first meeting in January as opposed to next week's meeting, because it would be the new board, you could do that. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of work during the Christmas break.
No, it's also very common to get an extension. So we run into this a lot, and I've dealt with municipal leasing consultants on 20 projects, and if we say, listen, can you extend the date till January 20th, they'll do that.
Well, you still need to give the new board the depth of information that this committee has received. So you'd have to run it through the finance committee again, I would think.
It wouldn't have to.
Okay.
Mr. Mosher, do you have any questions or comments?
I have been thinking about it, and it's kind of convoluted when you get to thinking about the nickels and dimes of lease and bonding. And my thoughts have been also on the volatility of the cost of the materials and the electricity, and the cost of electricity goes up and our savings is the same, that means that we are kind of on a gravy boat there. But I've been thinking about it, and either way, it looks like it's half and half. And I am considered that it would be a good idea because it's so late in the year, and elections have just been over, and new board is coming in, new committees coming in. So I think that what we should do is let it go for the new board and the new committee. And that's why they can be apprised of the situation and the difference in cost between leasing and bonding, and maybe there's some really shrewd brains over there that's coming in that'll be able to take a look at it and be able to make more sense of it than what I've got.
Okay, thank you. I don't think energy costs are going down. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith.
I guess I respectively disagree with kicking the can down the road. I don't use the word no-brainer very often with this committee, but this is a no-brainer. You're not affecting the operating budget one iota. You're covering the cost with the savings that you can foresee. If the savings don't occur, then we have a guarantee that they'll be paid by the contractor. As Mr. Donovan indicated, they're engineers. I'm an engineer. I know very well that they didn't skin this cat so close that we're in any danger of losing money, or actually they'd be in danger of losing money. Chances are they have a good factor of safety on the savings that they foresee. So I anticipate we're going to save more than what they show in their write-up. I would encourage us to move forward. I hate to see things come to a dead stop just because the people in office are changing. You're hired here to do the job. You're paid not very much, but you are paid something to make decisions. And I guess I would encourage you to do so. I'm sorry if I'm coming across as lecturing people I work for, but I don't mean to do that at all. It is truly a no-brainer. I think we should just proceed with it. It gives them more time to get working on design. If we wait till January, that's one less month they'll have. Granted, it's over the holidays. You're probably not working that hard anyway. I could be wrong on that. But depending on how long the next board wants to talk about and deliberate it and re-educate them and everything else, we could be end of February before this thing gets approved. And that, I think, puts them in a little bit of an extremist position of getting the design done. Keep in mind when we do any of these projects, and you're seeing it you've seen it in the elementary schools that we've done for the past 7 or 8 years, 9 years. You're seeing it in the middle school project. As we wait, the costs do go up. And the other thing they have to do, not only do they have to design this, but they have to then bid out the work. So I suspect it's something as like a construction manager. They're in that same role that we're accustomed to doing. And if you're bidding out work in May, you're not getting good pricing. You're just not, because everybody, think about it, they're all really good contractors are already tied up for the summer. So you're going to get the second-tier contractors, the third-tier contractors, and maybe they're very good on their own right, but you're not getting the very best. So I think that's a problem with pushing this back. I just highly recommend you proceed.
Okay.
Can I ask?
Sure, Mr. Donovan.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for Mike. One of the things is the timing of this, as far as the bond payment. I mean, the examples in the amortization schedule, you make that payment in January. Mm-hmm. So, but we would need to have savings for the full year to pay. So I'm just concerned that we match a full year of savings with a payment.
Yeah, that's what typically happens. So we typically once the final contracts have been approved by the attorneys on the lease and all that, that's typically what we do. We match the payment schedule to the energy savings, and so oftentimes the actual period will finish construction in August. And then you'll have that full savings from September to September and have the payment due at that point.
Okay, but we have a operating budget that sort of runs July through June. Now, I know if most of the savings are during winter months, that's typically August might work, but if you finish the work in January, we're only gonna have 6 months, so could the payment be pushed into the summer?
It can, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Just to follow on, so that would be like a construction project again, where you reach substantial completion, and that's really the date when all the warranties and everything else start. Mm-hmm. Is that the same thing here with the financing?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Did anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to
Okay.
approve the process and push it on to the full board.
Move to approve the contract. Would you say the contract?
Yes.
The contract with municipal leasing consultants?
Yeah,
Oh.
and the
Right.
investment grade audit
And
with EEI.
investment grade audit with EEI. I have it written down for you. I'll reread it. And I'll second it. Move to approve a contract with municipal leasing consultants and investment grade audit with EEI. Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
I'm going to abstain.
From what I've read, you have to have a reason to abstain.
Because if not, I'll vote no. And I prefer to make my vote at the board, not here. I'm still uncertain.
Well, you can vote no.
You have my vote, Mrs. Oden.
Okay. A no.
I abstained. That is my vote.
From reading Robert's rules, you have to voice a reason why you're abstaining.
I just gave it.
Like if you have a conflict of interest or
No,
something
okay,
like
so
that.
I will vote no, and the reason is I don't like paying over $1 million in interest
Okay, thank you.
of taxpayer money.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden is a yes. The motion passes 2-1. Okay? Thank you all very much. Mr. Smith,
Quick question. So this would go to the Board of Ed next week?
the 18th of
18th.
December.
And would you like EEI to be at that meeting?
Yes, I think you should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hate to ask you to come
No,
back
we're happy to.
again. I know you've been here a lot.
Thanks, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bring Christmas cookies with you.
Okay, Christmas cookies.
Okay. And the next item on the agenda is the electric pricing proposals.
Okay, so we talked about this last month, and the direction you gave us was to go out and talk to some known contractors and at least get us a bridging type contract that would get us to the end of when Agera Energy would have covered, which would be a year from now. Again, Agera Energy has declared bankruptcy. They indicated on basically November 1st that there was 30 to 60-day window where they weren't certain. They wouldn't commit to when they would stop serving us. We actually got a call from Eversource today saying, oh, by the way, we're going to be taking over your account. It's going to be the default rate when you're with us. And so that it's definitely happening. So we went out to two contractors. One was Direct Energy, who we've worked with in the past. They are currently our contractor and supplier for natural gas. We've been working with them for a long time. And then we also talked to Constellation Energy. They are providing electricity for the rest of the city at this point. And we've also used them for our electrical needs in the past. So we just got numbers today. So the default rate with Eversource would be $0.099 per kilowatt hour. What we're currently paying with Agera is $0.069. And I provided the quotes that just came in. The Direct Energy is indicating they can provide us a rate very close or just under what Agera Energy has been providing. So for the 1 year period, that's $0.06887, which is just a skosh under $0.069.
87 or 78?
0.06887 is for the 1 year. So that'd be on the second piece of paper, that handout I brought tonight. Constellation for that same time period was 0.07710. So it's pretty clear that direct energy is the cheaper of the two. So my recommendation is to go with them. The decision you have before you is, okay, I know that you told me to go out for 1 year. They themselves came back with, okay, this is what we typically do. They always give us 3 years. They did that again. The rates for 2 years are pretty darn good. You know, it's cheaper even to go pay for 2 years than it is for 1 year. So I'm suggesting we want to consider that pretty carefully. And I know it's not fully open competition at this point because we only went to 2 vendors. There are other vendors out there. In my experience working in the utilities, these two are almost always right at the top or at the bottom of the pricing schedule. So I'm comfortable recommending go 2 years, but I know the direction was 1 year at the last meeting. And
So this rate's lower than Agera,
correct,
had we stayed with them, but it was only 1 more year with Agera,
correct,
right?
yes. It's really anybody's guess where electrical rates are going to go in the future. I just don't have that crystal ball. It depends on depends on the price of natural gas, because a lot of the plants that are producing electricity are now run by natural gas. There's nuclear power that's out there. There's desire to get away from that. Oil-fired plants, coal-fired plants are going away. Solar and hydroelectricity, all these other things are coming online. Wind power is creating electricity. So it's tough to really say what this is going to be in a year from now, much less 2 years. One of the gentlemen that we were talking to about this said, at minimum, do a year and then let's talk in the spring, because you're ramping up for the winter time. Even on the futures market, you're still ramping up. And if you wait till the spring, then chances are prices will go down. But you don't know that. It's a roll of the dice. So the bottom line is I recommend we go with direct energy, and then I recommend 2 years, but that's just my recommendation.
At least 1 year.
At least 1 year. There's a lower rate for 2 years, and when you're talking hundredths of a cent, it's not very much, but it is cheaper for 2 years.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm inclined to go with the 2 years. That's less than if we would have retained the contract we just lost. Did I say that right?
Correct.
So I saw there's built in over a penny there, right? Actually 6.9, so it's, a penny and a fraction. So for me, is a slam dunk 3 years. I know 0.68 is still less than what we would have next year. You guys tell me. I mean, I'd certainly go in for 2, but I would consider 3. You're locking your costs down. It seems competitive better than what we are now that we just lost, which was then competitive.
And I guess the only negative to that, this is just 2 bids versus we could get more. So I'd lean towards 1 or 2 instead of the 3, my opinion. But
Yeah, I go with the 2 year.
Okay.
Just one more point. So I know this isn't the final say, because this is the committee. It still has to go to the full board, which will be next week. So the 18th is a Wednesday?
yes.
Whatever. So next Wednesday, or actually Tuesday, I go back to these same guys and say, update your quote. It may change between now and then. Just know that. It changed from last month to today even. In one case it went down, in one case it went up. So I don't know why that happened. But, so there will be different numbers that you see next Wednesday.
So maybe the motion might be to accept a minimum of 1 year if the rates don't change, 2 years, if that's what you want to do, but
I think so.
We could always amend the motion at the board meeting based on the price.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the contract with Direct Energy.
So moved.
To approve the
I think you want to specify the term.
bit more. Do you want to elaborate on that motion, Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, I mentioned before, I'd go with the 2-year.
Move to approve contract with Direct Energy for 2 years.
Do you want to mention the price? If you leave out the price, we could fill it in at the board meeting when you have the latest information, if it still holds. This way we're,
Good second.
If you just give that to Dan, then we'll have it for the board meeting.
Oh, yeah. I'll probably even show up for it because we got
Okay.
all sorts of things on it. There's a chance that Constellation
but
slips
we
underneath.
can't do anything
So
here. We can't take any action, can we, that would lock this in, right? It takes board action to commit the district. So, I mean, the committee can, I think all we can do is make a recommendation here. We can't do it. We can't authorize anything. I mean, we can accept donations from people, thank you, but we can't spend without a full board.
You got that right.
Well, you can always amend your motion, right, at the full board level.
Well,
So,
I think by leaving the price out, we'll fix it. Wherever the best, I guess strategically, wherever the best rate is, if it's 1 or 2, that's what we'll specify a rate at that time. Is that a plan?
Yeah, it is for me.
Okay. And I'll second Mr. Mosher's motion. Please.
So what I have is a motion to approve the contract with Direct Energy for 2 years. We're stopping at that.
Anything else?
You might want to specify a natural gas electricity contract. There you go.
For electricity, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, a roll call. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Oden is yes, passes unanimously. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Now we're on to the annual deferred maintenance and capital improvement request.
Which is more Mr. Smith. We're getting a great night here, lots of Mr. Smith.
Okay, so this is the same thing we do every year. I present the deferred maintenance list to you and also the capital improvement. Both of those then feed the capital improvement process. They're forms that we fill out once the Board of Ed has approved everything. And then Mr. Donovan and I go to the capital improvement committee in January. So before I get to the memo, I'd like to go to the spreadsheet, which is attached, and it just gives you a sense for how many projects there are. You've been used to seeing annual requests from me of about $600,000. It's been that way since the early 2000s. We've shot for $600,000. That goes back to Mark Conrad's era as a business administrator. That was kind of the number he suggested we use. I'm not seeing that as, not that I'm going to get $1 million either, but I'm not seeing as 600,000 is getting us any, we're not making any progress. So I've upped the ante, so to speak. Certainly your choice to go with it or tell me to pare it down. There are even, so the total deferred maintenance backlog is $11 million. So stop and think about if I got $100,000 every year, which I've been doing every year lately. How many years is that, Dan? I don't. It's a lot of years. I'll never catch up, and then not catching up, I'm going to be adding to it as time goes on. So that's not tenable. And it's part of the reason
Job
why
security.
Job security, yeah. Dan and I won't be here at the end of when all this is done. So I'm suggesting that we,
Mr. Mosier, Mr. Mosier, we're having problems with your phone?
No.
Okay. We're hearing a lot of noise on it. Okay, thank you.
so, as we always do, we're projecting out 6 years. I'm averaging probably 1.3 million over those 6 years. And then after those 6 years, there's still $3 million of projects that haven't been addressed, assuming I get everything I asked for. In addition to that, there is about $700,000 worth of projects that I deferred and totally took out of the annual computations because they're dealing with the middle schools. Of course, we're most likely embarking on a middle school project here pretty soon, so I just took those out of the annual amounts. And then on the very end, last sheet on the spreadsheet are all the capital projects that we have in the queue, starting with a middle school project, and then once that finishes, we have lots more stuff going on. I did include, which I can certainly change before we get to the Capital Improvement Committee, but the 3.8 million each year for energy performance contracts, I would take that out, obviously, if we go to a lease arrangement. So, without any further ado, I'll get into the actual projects for next year that I'm proposing. The life extension at the high school for the chiller units, we've already had 3 years of this. The Board of Ed actually approved this 3 years ago, and so we have 1 more year left, and next year would be the final year. Second project are motion detectors, the 2 high schools. We have motion detectors in all our schools, except for the high schools. It provides an additional means of security. In the event somebody does get in the school, this will detect, it is what it says it is, a motion detection. Bicentennial, if you look at the capital plan where Bicentennial might be renovated, which I think I'm projecting that potentially to be fiscal year 29. The classroom, we call them storefronts. So it's the windows and the doors. It's all made out of metal. Those are rusting, and we're getting infiltration of air and water and everything else. If you go over there, you can see we replaced a couple last year, but you can see them rusting on the bottom, and they're not going to last till fiscal year 29. So that's what that project is.
Can I ask a quick question there, Sean? How many of those are there? Will this finish them, or?
Oh, no.
So there's plenty more left?
Plenty more left, yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Sure.
So either the one before it in terms of the motion detectors and also the storefronts, correct me here because I'm obviously don't recall the detail. We had the security updates that we've been doing over the last couple of years that largely paid for by the state. We had to pick up 20% of them. And if I remember correctly, I know vestibules, some were reconfigured. Obviously, this front is the structure before you get into the vestibule. But in any of those projects, were the storefronts addressed?
No.
In other words, would the state money, if they came through with more money for security, would these instances, could they be covered by those kinds of upgrades?
I guarantee if there's any more money that comes out, I'll be in line asking for it. But in my mind, that's not what this is. This is strictly the classrooms that have an exterior door to them and windows. That's what this is. This really has.
So this isn't the front of the building. These are the classroom doors that are on the
wings,
ground
well away
level.
from the main.
Oh, okay.
So the vestibules, those projects have been strictly the main entrance. So that's that. So if you've been at Bicentennial, I mean, go to any school at opening and closing of the school, it's exciting, watching all the traffic. Bicentennial, if you have a chance at all to go out there and watch it, it's dangerous. You have an intersection right up the road, and cars go zipping down. You have cars trying to turn left into traffic from the school. It's kind of a nightmare. We actually had a plan that we went forward to the state 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. It was a safe routes to school, and we had a consultant prepared. They did it for free. A plan. It was going to cost at that point about $300,000 to do the work, $250,000, $300,000. So I'm suggesting this is just the design piece of that. Yeah. I don't think their offer of doing it for free anymore still stands. We haven't used them for a long time. Replace worn flooring. So that's primarily carpet. And in the memo, I list specifically what we plan to do with the media center at Amherst Street, North High School auditorium, carpet. Those are both the runners and the carpet that's in the front of all the seating. The main office at the South High School, and classrooms at both Main Dunstable and Birch Hill. So a lot of on the latter subject, Main Dunstable, we just have a couple more classrooms left because we've been replacing a couple every year. Birch Hill, we have quite a few more to go. And again, if renovation was imminent, then I would say we hold off on doing it. But we got the middle school project, and then who knows at that point. Then there are sections of the VCT and Charlotte Avenue. You walk, particularly to the left, and you go around the nurse's office. There's some problems with the VCT. There's tripping hazards, basically. So that's what that project is. The new Searles classroom window units. So again, those units need to be replaced. They're leaking. We're not going to be addressing that school for another 10 years at least. And that's what that project is for. When we did the renovations at Fairgrounds, Ledge, and Charlotte Avenue, that was between the years of 2011 and 14, I want to say, or 13. Did those three schools. We did not put dehumidification in the rear wing. Because you're looking at the school, you just go down the main hallway right down to the center school, and that very last wing does not have dehumidification. We ran out of money in those projects, and this would go back and take care of that. So we have some teachers that are working in conditions other than what their compatriots are working in elsewhere in the school. I think it'd just be a goodwill gesture so that everybody's working in the same environment.
Can I just add to that, Mr. Smith?
Yep.
Visiting Fairgrounds Elementary for the summer program that they run there with the Boys and Girls Club, to walk in when we were taking the tour to go into one of the wings that had the dehumidification system and one that didn't. It was unbelievable. And when you're using a school in the summer, whatever areas you're using really should be as comfortable as possible. I mean, it was oppressive when we were touring that. So, and I didn't realize the whole school hadn't been done. I think you probably heard from me or something when I asked, is it working? And it's not installed. I
do remember that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the way, I can't say for sure, I think the older kids are in that back wing, the fifth graders, but I'm not sure if that's the same in all three schools. Periodically, when you have a wood gym floor, you need to sand down, get rid of, it tends to move over time. It's supposed to move over time. And then you have buildup of the waxes, the finishes. So I'm proposing to refinish those floors. So I'm not sure how much because I haven't been part of the conversation, preschools. So the administration is looking at putting the preschool children in one location. Is that news for you?
It's news to me, yeah.
Okay, so I hope I'm not spilling the beans on this one. Um, They're looking at doing that. And I think Mr. Donovan's probably been involved in some of the conversations. I think we're seeing that the elementary schools are starting to get overloaded. We have no spare classrooms. The special education programs need more space. I think district-wide we're down to one spare classroom, and so it's an issue. And depending on what you want to look at as far as projections of populations and whatnot, the issue's not going to go away. So one of the ideas that the administration is looking at is putting all the preschool children in one location. And Mr. Donovan and I and some other one of the assistant superintendents, Garth, and some other people looked at Infant Jesus this past week as a possibility, which is the Catholic school that shut down this past year. So that's what this project is. I mean, this is just there as a placeholder. It could easily come out. I really hope I didn't spill the beans too much. I didn't know how else to put it on the project list.
All I can say, somebody put a bug in my ear about it, and I mentioned to Dr. Mosley the value of having all the preschools in one building, plus Dr. Crisp is going over at the seams. And you might be able to save on resources if all the resources you have for preschool are in one building. You don't have people traveling to fill in spots. So quite frankly, I would be very happy to hear if they're just looking at that, because I think it would be an improvement, and it would free up some room in some of our schools. So.
We've also met with Tim Cummings, who's the community development
Economic development
economic
director.
development. And so we're going to look at other spaces. There are 3 or 4 other places we're going to take a look at
Okay.
over the coming month.
Good.
And I expect the administration will come forward with a
So-
recommendation.
Because we still have to look at, Brentwood has this year and one more year. You know, we don't want to lease if we don't have to, so we're looking at some other options. So this is part of that, but this is the first time that we're letting, as part of our capital equipment plan, letting people know that, okay, one of the options we're looking at here is consolidating the preschools.
No, that may make a lot of sense, and I'm glad to hear it's in conjunction with Brentwood, because it sounds like it's going to be a lease. So we're obviously not going to build a building. Unless you can use that extra 50,000 square feet at the new building, I'm not convinced with the architect's explanation of it. But I was going to ask about Brentwood. So the other thing is, this is not in the strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there was any provision for this, was there? Ms. Porter, you're the closest person to it.
For,
Preschoolers into one location, consolidation. Are they talking about expanding the program too, or just the ones, the kids we have? Because they're all Title I, right?
No, they're not all Title I. We have, I believe, 16 preschool programs now, and they're spread amongst all different schools. One of the things that we are struggling with space is special ed programs, especially ones dealing with behavior issues. We just don't have enough of those programs available, so that some students that really need that are affecting the current classrooms, there's not a lot of places to put them. So this was something that would open up more spaces to deal with some of the special ed programs and potentially keep some of those kids in the district instead of sending them out, which is extremely expensive, as we all know.
So the figure I have there of 200,000 is just a placeholder.
Okay.
Depends on the facility that if we proceed with this, depends on the facility. Just having gone to Infant Jesus, I think we need more than 200,000. It's just because we need to make sure it's handicap accessible. We can build ramps into the school, and within the first floor there are stairs that you have to get up and down, but there is no elevator to get to the second floor, or even a chairlift. And there's some other minor issues. Actually, that school's in very good shape. I mean,
It is. It was.
It's ready to go, exception of some fixtures that we'd have to put in there to make it accessible.
I understand it's wired
Yes,
It is,
for technology.
yes, it is. Yep.
That's what I understand.
And even wireless,
Oh, okay.
wired to be wireless, I guess.
That's what you have to do.
Yep.
So I can answer his question about, So in this strategic plan on action step 5.4, and I think this is something that we talked about, continue to work on capital improvements within the Nashua School District per the city's capital improvements plan and the deferred maintenance plan. So I think that
But there was never any
it's not
direct discussion.
specific. It's not a specific, but it's in there in general so that it could, you can't, I think when we were writing this, we couldn't anticipate everything that would come, but there's a place in there where it could fit in.
Well, I think it's great that there's a placeholder. I'm glad you guys are looking at it, but I would make the argument that you would do better to focus on the out-of-district tuition sped students and finding a home for them inside the district. I mean, that's your cost driver, right? $300 to $400 a year. Let's keep adding. Preschool is not required. It's like kindergarten. It's not required by state law. I know that that's why I thought they were all Title I programs, and they weren't in the operating budget. Are they in the operating budget, these preschools?
Yes, but they are required by law. These are for special ed.
For special ed
students.
kids, yes.
Yes.
But not other students. So it's a special ed thing.
Yes.
So I think the special ed thing, K through 12, needs to be looked at and that's been my criticism of the strategic plan all along, is that the focus is put in year 5. And we learn about it when we get the new middle school project and they want to build a wing for it, but that's only good for 3 grades. So there really needs to be a comprehensive look, preschool through 12. I think you're just putting a finger in a dike otherwise.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you want to
Actually, a
continue?
good segue to my next one here, the facility master plan. So yeah, we have a lot of these programs, and the needs come and go, they change, but we don't really have a plan. I mean, we maintain it, we have deferred maintenance plans, we have capital plans. I kind of know the condition of all the buildings. I think it'd be good to have a document, kind of a roadmap on just what do we have, what programs do we have to fold in, how do we make all that work? If we're bringing out of district people back for grades 1 through 5, and then the high school, even if the middle school project takes care of that, we still have all the rest of it. So that's one thing. I mean, this preschool is a perfect example of something that would fold into that. We don't have any classroom space. I mean, to his point about bringing out of district back, how do we do that unless we create space? Another good reason to take the preschool out of the elementary schools. And so is that a have to have? No, it's not a have to have, but I think it's a very good idea that we have a plan. I mean, it's something Mr. Dunham and I could probably put together, but somehow when consultants do it for you, it has more impact. I don't know. And then the very last thing is Brentwood and the SAU office. That's just kind of ongoing conversation. Mr. Dunham started to talk about it. So we have one more year after this year for the lease for Brentwood. So at the end of that year, that's when this budget comes into play. So starting in school lets out of that year, so that's 2 summers from now, then we have to be modifying some facility unless we extend the lease. I guess that's always a possibility too. So that's what this number is. One of the thoughts was move Brentwood into the SAU office and find a home for the SAU people. Everything's kind of up in the air at this point. So this again is another placeholder. I would just say lastly, with deferred maintenance, these aren't necessarily in order of priority. What I would say, what's most important versus least important. And I can do that for you if you think that'd be beneficial.
So on that facility master plan, the $250,000, is that for a consultant to do
Yes.
it?
Yes.
But you're saying that we could do it in-house?
Without sounding irreverent, my experience with this community has been, I can say something, and the chief operating officer can say something, and people nod their head politely, but if a consultant tells you the same thing, it could be exactly the same thing. It seems to have more weight, and it's
That's
just what I've
unfortunate.
observed.
Yeah, that's too bad, because that's a lot of money,
It is. It is.
and we have the expertise right here. So I actually think that that's a priority, the master plan, because that's going to guide really what's happening. So I actually like that idea quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Donovan and I have already talked about, we can do a lot of it ourselves.
So that would be
Because you have to
like-
bring in different teams, right? It's just not just finance and the
Right.
buildings. You have to bring in all the different project leaders and whatnot. Special education, you have to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
So
So it's like an
we'd have
audit.
to talk.
Yeah,
We'd have to talk to the superintendent and have some sort of plan to make the plan, because you have a lot of different focus groups that have to come in. But something we could do.
I think that's a great idea.
We actually went to our current architect and asked him, okay, what would it cost us to do this? And they said $350,000 to $400,000. And I got sticker shock, so I put down a lower number. I said, well, we'll find a cheaper architect someplace to do it. But Mr. Donovan and I wouldn't say we're free, but we can do it for a lot less than $250.
$150, right?
See that? We're going to get a stipend.
Okay.
So that's the deferred maintenance. Again, and if you wish, I can prioritize these a little bit better. They're very loosely in order of priority.
I do have one other question. Mr. Donovan made a comment that some of the things addressed in the energy proposal, at the two high schools, some of those items might be on this list.
They're not.
They're not. They're separate things,
If
right?
you go through the whole 6
That's what I
years
was
and out
looking-
years,
yeah.
there's nothing in here that the energy project would do.
Would you have done any of that stuff?
Yes.
Okay, lighting, probably.
LED, that's the easy one.
That's the
Yeah,
easy one,
that's the
right?
real
Everybody
easy
knows
one.
that, so.
But there are other elements that we
Would you ever
probably do.
replace the transformers?
That's something that I never even thought of doing, but it makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to understand if there was overlap or not, because I think you suggested that there might have been. And when I was looking at this
Didn't
list,
do it, you'd see some of those items in this plan. If we
Gotcha.
decided not to do it, then we'd probably,
well,
we do this once a year, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the boilers, those are now 17 years old, 15 years old, probably last another 17 or 15 years. But at some point, those would be in here.
List, yeah. Okay, thank you.
So then the second half of this is the capital plan. So when we go forward to the capital improvement committee, we have a form that we fill out. It lists deferred maintenance as one item, but then lists all the other projects. So we have the middle school project I've got listed here. Those are just rough numbers. Those are actually when I expect the money to be expended. So all that should be adding up close to 120 million, which is a round number at this point. Then I'd propose the year after that project is complete to start the design work on Main Dunstable, then do the construction the following year, then proceed to Birch Hill, and then potentially Mount Pleasant. But at that point, maybe the facility master plan will tell us which way to go. In the meantime, if we decide to go with the lease, I will definitely move those two numbers out. The 3.8 million, the energy performance contractors contracts. The other project in here are security improvements. I've pushed that back another year. In my view, we've been making good headway in security. We can push that back and think about it a little bit more. Perhaps, again, the master plan can help us with that. I was asked by Nick Caggiano, who's the Park and Rec supervisor, to put in a plan for replacing the turf at Stella Stadium. Seems like we just did it, but it's in fact been 6 years already, I believe, give or take. And that turf is expected to last 10 to 12 years. So by the time we get to 2023, that'll be the 10 years or 12 years since we last replaced it. There are some other things that we would do with that to upgrade the facility. There's a rubber roof underneath. So on top of all the concession stands, but underneath the stands, there's a rubber roof that we'd look to potentially replace. And then at this facility, North High School, projecting by 2024, we're going to have to put a lot of money into the pavement, curbing, and that sort of thing. We did some work this past summer. We do a little bit of work every summer. We have, this past year, we took care of the sidewalk walkways in the very front of the school and then also in the back. But we actually went to DPW. They recommended we go to a consultant. We hired the consultant to do an assessment of the high school pavement, and they came up with actually a 5-year plan. I just put it all, the entire amount in 1 year at this point. So that's all I've got to say at this point. You can tell me what you want to do with deferred maintenance. If you want to keep the numbers that high, going forward year to year, or if we decide to lower that amount, it just, of course, it just pushes that back to the out years. Very much a domino effect.
Are you asking for a comment?
Direction, actually.
I think that what you've done is keeps it real, say it that way. It keeps things in perspective. I know the operating budget, that number is always going to apparently to be inadequate. If there was a way those energy savings came, I said it, I think the last time, I'd love to throw it into this account. But I think you need to tell the board what's required. If you this is chipping away at it, and it's still 1.3, 1.6. And I think you need to keep presenting it that way. That would be my suggestion. And I appreciate that you spread it out as well as you can.
What I was going to say, I think this is realistic. I don't think we can just not identify our needs and our costs to rectify some of these issues or maintain our property. It's part of the operational expense, really. So I appreciate this, and I think it's good to have realistic numbers in there. So, Mr. Mosher, do you have any comment?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay.
I am amazed, with the amount of schools, and you have 11,000 kids traipsing through there every day. I don't think that people have an idea, really, the public does not have an idea of the wear and tear that takes place on the buildings. Considering the summer, the heat, the rain, and then the wintertime, the ice and snow, and just the idea of having the kids running through the school with their boots and whatnot. That the fact that he has put everything in order and tried to keep in a priority order and keeping it flexible enough so that should something unforeseen come up, that he can divert his resources to that crisis that may show its face. So I think that Sean has got a real-time thing there, a real-time job, just keeping the process aligned and moving ahead with it as best he can. I really am amazed at the amount of stuff that goes on in these schools. I'm a building person myself, and the mechanical part of everything, and I look at it and I shake my head and I say, well, what's going to happen next? And while we were sitting here and talking about these these things. I was thinking about the snow load on the roof, and then the rain coming in. I said, has anybody looked at any of this stuff to see if there's any problems that are popping up? So I appreciate what the amount of work that goes into this, and I say, good grief, I'm just glad that we have Sean there to, kind of shuffle things around, keep the ship afloat, so to say. So I'm done.
Since Mr. Mosier brought up snow, and it's on everybody's mind, so many years ago, after the Pennachuck roof collapsed, we commissioned a study by a structural engineer to take a look at all our schools and all the roof structures. And they did so, and they came up with recommended snow load capacities for each school. And we've been operating with that ever since. And the nominal amount that before we even start to get worried, but start to pay more attention, is about 2 feet of snow. That's pretty true for every single school. Some are more than that. Some are slightly below that. Pretty much 2 feet is where we start to take a look. Where we then had rain the other day, then I started to think about it a little bit. But then we had this 50-degree weather. So it's really knocked the snow amount quite a bit. So at this point, we're still in good shape. What's going to happen is that cold weather is going to come back. Mm-hmm. So all that snow mixed with the moisture is now going to be an ice layer right on the very top of the roof. So we're still going to have to watch it. It's something we do every year. But we have a pretty good program, and all my supervisors, all the head custodians, all the principals all have that sheet that tells them how much snow. And it's not just the dead load of snow on a flat roof. It's where you have a vertical surface and a horizontal, then you have drifting. That's where the heavyweight snow can occur. So those are the sorts of things we watch. Just want to assure everybody that the schools are safe that way.
Yeah, well, I remember when the wall collapsed in the other place, and I remember when we were looking at the snow load, because the wind had drifted the snow so that in some places it was quite a bit deeper than what we had anticipated, and that was a concern, because I remember having the workers up on the roof shoveling it off, and I said, my God. So it's put in my mind now about the winter time, and then with the 2 feet of snow that we had over here in Nashua, and then looking at rain, I said, oh my God, I hope nothing happens.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess what you've done in the past is approve the plan, go forward to the Board of Ed, and then they vote on it next week.
Right, and then that we can bring it to the Capital Improvement Committee.
Right.
Okay. So looking for a motion to approve the deferred maintenance capital improvement plan.
So moved.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Should this not also go to the Budget Committee? Is this included in that?
Not usually. This is done usually in December at this committee and approved by the board. We then go to the city in January before we've even started the budget and share it with the Capital Improvement Committee.
Okay, I think well, I'm on to the next thing, but this is a great summary for the board members to understand what's in the pipeline. So I would just encourage you to include this in the budget book next year and call attention to
Yeah,
it.
I think it's been in the budget book at times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I think it's really, I mean, like Mrs. Oden said, and I said, it's a reality check.
Yes.
And these are, maybe you'd get an extra 100,000 or two at budget if they saw what the reality was.
Oh, sure.
Every little bit helps.
Still trying to help you, Sean.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the deferred maintenance capital improvements plan as presented this evening by Mr. Smith. Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Oden is yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Sean. That was a lot of work, and I think having that in front of people makes people realize how badly we need some assistance in maintaining our property. Thank you. That's anybody that has a house understands that, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The next issue on the agenda is the fiscal year 19 invoices over $10,000 report.
Yes. As one of the policies states, this is a report that is put together once a year. We wait until we've closed the books from the previous year. We then summarize all the invoices over 10,000, comes in a spreadsheet. I summarize them by vendor, and then sort of group them by utilities, transportation, rental, et cetera, as it is on the sheet. You can see the amounts, and then I give a description, whether it was bid and whether a contract was approved by the BOE. So just run through it quickly. There's the utilities. Obviously, we spend a lot of money heating and air conditioning in our schools. The direct energy is where we purchase the supplies, so that does get approved by the board. The other things are just normal course of action. Transportation, there's the very large contract with First Student, and there's potential for, you'll probably be seeing another proposal for that in the next few months. And then there's the other smaller costs where those are the costs to move the out-of-district students around. Now, we don't necessarily have a contract for each and every time we do it because those kids sort of come and go. But Dave does bid out trying to get the best price. A lot of times he can only find one person that's willing to do the trip, especially if it's further away. Then rentals, that's the hockey team rink at Conway Arena. Brady Sullivan is the Brentwood rent. Then this special ed tuition, you can see these are all the ones that had an individual invoice over 10,000. You can see that significant number for Lighthouse School. That's where we have more students than any place. And those aren't necessarily approved by the board because of the individual, it's following the individual IEPs. The next group is supplies and services, basically plant operations items. Just about all those items have been approved by the board. We bring most of those to the board. One that wasn't there was the Camco lock, but that was one invoice just barely over 10,000. It was a whole bunch of small items. So it's not the type of thing we typically bring to the board. Then there's books and supplies. Most of this has run its way through the curriculum committee, either through a pilot or their purchases of books made through grants. Some of the smaller ones are where the Title I grant, especially when they get towards the end of the year, they use some of the excess funds to purchase books for the schools and the classrooms. Then there's services. This is a whole potpourri of stuff. The audit for the Student Activity Fund, the Clearway School for the typical students, the OTPT, those things all come through the board. The specialized purchasing consultants, that's the contract, not for the lease of the copiers, but we pay so much per click. So that's what that is. And then Burke Group was a professional, there's a couple professional development things paid through either by the Title II or that new Title IV grant. Multi-state billing is the Medicaid billing services. Hopefully we're going to start collecting money on that again. The state's got to get back in shape there. Boys and Girls Club, mostly those costs are mostly grants where we've written a grant and we sort of share some of the Then the next list is all the computer services. Most of those things are annual licenses for software that we have. We share those with the board each year during the budget, and then basically we pay most of them in the beginning, in the summer each year. Those don't officially come back, but they're sort of shared in the budget here. Here's what we pay for Microsoft. Here's what we pay for all the various softwares, Blackboard Connect, and things that we've been using year over year. Then the next list is a bunch of the equipment things. There's the scoreboard enterprises. We bought the new scoreboard at Stella's. That went against the reserve fund that was set up for Stella's costs. PCS is, food service grants. So some of these things come from grants or from the donations. Then there's the conferences, just 10,000. That's the CTE dues, which actually is paid by the Perkins grant. Then we go to the miscellaneous on the back, and you can see Donors Choose, which is in the budget each year. The Norway Savings Bank, that is the lease that we talked about earlier on the copiers. It's $97,000 a year. I think there's 2 more years left. And then a few other things. You will notice the YMCA is a large number this year, but most of that is the Power Scholars program, because they did so we basically paid them. They did hire a lot of our employees, but they were the vendor, so to speak. And then the next couple things are things that are either done with deferred maintenance monies or with the bonds. The bottom part is the beginning. 3 of those items are work done on the middle school project, and then the roofing was a bond we did about 1.5 years ago to do roofing at, I believe, 5 different schools. So it shows you that it's 18 million. Like I said, it's not all operating budget stuff. Some of it's bonding money, some of it's deferred maintenance money, and some of it's coming from grants. But it sort of gives you a sense of the large items / vendors that we work with on an annual basis. When I put this together, I sort of look back year to year. A lot of it's the same items. So there's always probably 7 or 8 things that I don't know what they are. I have someone look them up, and a lot of times it's things coming through curriculum committee. So that is that report.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
So you had enough money in the special ed budget at 3.3 for this?
What's that?
You had 3.3 for the special ed out of district. So
Yeah, well, it was
budget year, you had enough money then, or close to it?
Well, it was more than that. These were just the large invoices.
Oh, okay, all right, over the 10.
Total was about 6 million, really.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the November financial report.
Okay, we'll just run through this quickly. This is through November, so it is, fiscal year, we're 5/12 through, 42%, or we're 3/10, or 30% through the school year. And in total, if you look at the back page, it shows we're percent used 35.45. So it's in between those two numbers. So in total, we're okay. The salaries and wages are running according to budget. The 6.6 million is in line with any month where we have 4 weekly pays and 2 biweekly pays. The overtime number's down a little bit from what it was the last couple of months, which is good. Sort of sliding down the...
Excuse me, is that because of the change to the custodial contract, or just...
No, I think there was just probably less actual overtime worked filling in for other people.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Then the stipends, the middle school athletic coaches were paid, so that's why that's 27,000. 22 of that 27, the rest is the monthly head teacher amounts. And then on the retirement and separation pay, there was 39,000. The last teacher with the significant severance payment received her payment this month. So there's only, of the list I received in March from HR, there's one teacher that supposedly has a $4,000 severance payment that hasn't received it yet. Other than that, they've received all their monies. We have $143,000 left there. This month we did have Amanda Bastoni left, so she had vacation time. So that was probably about $6,000, $7,000 or so. So you'll still see that for people that leave, but we shouldn't see lots of people leaving, I wouldn't think. Okay, fringe benefits, as I say, most of those are accruals done by the city each month. And then professional technical services, that's been pretty steady, what we've been looking at. Property services, electricity, we're running a little lower than we were last year to date, about 46,000 less, which is good. The heating gas is right sort of where we were last year, and in total it was below budget last year, so we'll see how the winter works. And water is pretty close to last year. It's actually about 10,000 less. So our utility costs, which as a group are fairly significant, are showing decent signs at this point in time. And we'll switch over to page 2. Not too much there. Other services, I did go down, take a look at our transportation. We're 1 month behind on the regular transportation and the special ed transportation. So they did start catching up on the big monthly bills, but they're 1 month behind. Will probably be caught up in the next month or so. And then you can see the tuition out of district. There was $850,000 this month. But we still, we have $3.3 million left. My guess is we'll use all of that and probably more. Supplies and materials, nothing out of the ordinary there. We're doing fine. On those expenses, the equipment, computer equipment for the most part, a lot of that's been purchased and is in place. So all in all, I think we're in reasonably good shape. Nothing that's really too worrisome yet, though typically I don't run into something worrisome in November. I'll run into something more like March or April. But just looking at it, comparing it to, because one of the things I do, if you look, there's the sheet we've been going through, then there's the monthly one right behind it, and you can see the cost per month. And when you I'll take a look at that, and I'll take a look at that for last year too, and sort of compare them month by month for last year when I review them each month. So all in all, it looks like we're in decent shape.
Can I ask one question about the computer lines?
Sure.
So you have computer equipment and software, and obviously you have a balance in the account. You think that's going to be there for a while, or I could see that really getting spent at the beginning of a year or at the end during the summer to stock up for what we need to replace, because that's when most of that occurred, right? We would tend to buy in the summer, install, and go into the school year with.
Now, most of that is IT, but schools can also budget to those line items. So of the computer equipment, the $168,000 that's remaining in computer equipment, about $105,000 of that is IT. Because we had 2 significant items in our budget, hardware items, and we got the E-rate on both, so there's about $100,000 that we have. I'm hoping to maybe use that towards some of the switches that we need.
Oh, okay.
What the board's got to look at, I don't know when they're going to do it, but they're going to look at the $1 million that, the Board of Aldermen did vote on that.
Yeah.
And so there is $1 million, and I know there's the curriculum and switches, and, so the board can make the call, but I think taking this 100 with maybe some of that money, we can fix some of our switch issue.
I didn't realize we had any outstanding. I thought we fixed them. I thought we were pretty current on switches and things like that.
No, I think we needed like a new switch at almost every one of the schools now.
Okay, thanks.
So that's pretty much it for financial report.
Mrs. Oden? Move to accept and place on file the November 2019 financial report as provided.
Second.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Mosher, we're doing a roll call on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, yes, and Mrs. Oden is yes, passed unanimously. No. Motion to approve the fiscal year 20 November financial report. Yep, that's good. On to the transfer report.
Okay, short one this month. We'll wrap up the last transfer report of 2019. Okay, so the first item is simply it's the CTE group at North. They're moving items from miscellaneous equipment to educational supplies. Most of the items that they purchase actually ends up under educational supplies, even though many of them are things like lumber and wire and things like that, but we don't have specific accounts for those, so it ends up in educational supplies. The next one is it's simply moving two of the paras that were listed in the SPED department, but they're actually kindergarten paras, so just moving them out of SPED and into kindergarten. That was more of a budget error. And the last one is, okay, in the curriculum budget, they budgeted their additional hours as stipends. But most of those additional hours are paid to teachers to work on committees and things, the $25 an hour that they get for doing that extra work. So it was just put in the wrong line. So it's taking that out of stipends and actually putting it into additional hours. That's just another budget adjustment. And speaking of budget, we're working on that now to come up with sort of what our base budget is, and then I'm sure people will have plenty of requests to add to that base budget.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looking for a motion to approve the transfer report.
Move to accept and place on file the November 2019 transfer report as provided.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mrs. Oden is yes, passed unanimously. So I think our work is done. Looking for a motion.
To adjourn?
Second?
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Oden is yes. Thank you so much. It is 7:46.